All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining. We are going to talk to you today about vendor selection and coming to a crossroads and deciding if vendor selection is the path that you are going to take at your organization, or is there other opportunities for you to do some things in the meantime? So we're going to discuss some of those things today. I am Jennifer Ohlenberger, the president here at EHR Concepts, and I've been in this industry for quite some time, working alongside of a lot of organizations in operations and IT, and really understanding the needs and the struggles that our organizations are up against. I also have on the call today Dan Murray. You will meet with him in just a few minutes. He is one of our senior vice presidents here at EHR Concepts, and he is going to be sharing some insights on our advisory services and what we can do to aid to help you prepare for your vendor selection process. So first up is really understanding the crossroads that you may be at as an organization. We've found over the last few years that organizations are kind of in the area of deciding, are we going to move to RFP? Are we going to look at EHRs holistically and understand what we need from a system here at our organizations? Or are there things that we need to do with our current system that we could completely optimize and transform that would aid in reducing the burnout, enabling the adoption of the EHR? And so what we do here is really try to understand, how can we make health IT easier? Is there a strategy that we can help you at your organization to understand of what could change with our current EHRs? So before we even talk about vendor going to RFP and vendor selection, it's a good opportunity to evaluate how well you're using your current system. Are there gaps? Are there items that you're leaving on the table that you haven't really rolled out or utilized, or maybe you think you're utilizing your system to your fullest potential, but are we really? And as an organization, you could do an evaluation prior to even getting to that next step of really looking at your system, looking at the functionalities that the vendor states it should have, right? Because if the vendor says it can do it, why are we not doing that? So looking at the functionality, doing a survey with your providers to really understand, what is their pain points currently? What do they not like about their current system? And in doing that, you as an organization will find out that sometimes they say, I wish the EHR could do this, I wish the EHR could do that, and your system can do it. They just haven't been effectively trained enough to utilize that functionality. So sometimes we find that, we do those for organizations, but this is an opportunity for something that you could do as well, as saying, what gaps do we have and how are we using the system, and really understand the provider's pain points. So, we would recommend you all doing forums, doing like roundtables and groups with your providers to really understand the pain of their current situation. What is really aiding them in not getting home for dinner in time for their family? And that's what we want to then target. So that could then give you a lot of information to say, okay, well, our current system can do, 40% of this. Do we want to go back and do optimization, or do we want to, hire a firm like us or anyone to kind of help you do that? And so that's a good thing to start with when you're starting this process of considering it. And then the second thing, obviously, is if you've done some of that and you've done your due diligence and you're just very, there's so much frustration and fatigue in your current EHR, is really thinking through, we need to switch to a different vendor. This one is no longer meeting our needs. We have grown, we have expanded, we have used this one to its fullest potential. And then starting to walk through that vendor selection process of, what does it look like to go to an RFP? How do we even write an RFP to go out to these vendors to get them even interested in bidding and negotiating on what they could offer us as an organization? So walking through that process, and we're going to show you some of that of our guiding steps, but you can take these as well. Here at EHR Concepts, we always want to give back to you. And this is not just to sell you on our services. Of course, we offer these services, but if you could take some of these nuggets from this presentation to say, okay, we could do some of those things at our organization to really aid in this process of considering the move. And so we'll walk through some of those steps with you today. really the things to consider when you get to the point of going to selection is, what is our strategy here? What are our goals? What are our core values? What are we saying we're going to be delivering to our patients? And ultimately, we want your providers and your users satisfied with their EHR and their IT solutions, but we will also want a really a good foundation for patients. We want them to be satisfied with the care they received. And if they're seeing frustrations from technology from our providers and staff, that aids in their experience. So ultimately, it does come down to the patients of how we're supplying their needs. And so we want them to have a good experience with your organization. We want to help you strategize on the selection, transform what you're doing today in the clinical setting to create that optimal solution. And then, where are our revenue cycle gaps? Is there money left on the table? Are we adequately coding? Is there issues that we're having today that could transform as we go through this process? And so what we do is we consider those things, and then we obviously come up with cost savings, new strategies, provider and patient satisfaction techniques. And then ultimately, our goal is to reduce that burnout for you, for your staff, for your providers. So our approach to how we dive into these types of projects is we look at your systems and we say, is there a solution that's tailored for your needs? We do a lot of the process at the beginning, and we say, what is happening currently, as we talked about those surveys and those forums and those roundtables, to really understand. And then we try to find a solution that's going to be tailored for your needs. We work with your team members to manage. We conduct the discovery meetings and the roundtables for you from the leadership perspective, as well as your end users of whoever you would like to kind of represent each specialty. And we want to gain understanding of their pain. And then from there, we take all this information over a several week process and we compile a list of priorities. What is the most important for your organization? What do you want us to keep at the forefront and ultimately meet those goals from a financial, from an operational, from a satisfaction standpoint? We compile all of these lists and we put them in the wants list and the needs list, and then we kind of combine them with what we could get out of each vendor. And then ultimately, we use a 7-step process to walk through this from start to finish, to really understand the need and bring you a total cost of ownership, bring you negotiation techniques, and all through the process. So I'm going to pass it over to Dan Murray. As I said, he is one of our VPs here at EHR Concepts, and he really focuses on our advisory services. And so this is kind of an area of his specialty. So Dan, I'm going to pass it over to you and kind of walk them through these 7 stages that we have here at EHR Concepts of what we do through the vendor selection process.
Okay, thank you, Jen. So building upon what Jen has gone over and moving into the 7-step methodology, as you can see across there, and this process builds on each step. So the selection preparation is really kind of understanding your environment, understanding the processes that you're going through today, and that blends into the requirements identification. That what we use there is something called voice of the customer, and really going through an interview process that creates these raw notes, and those then get modified down into what's considered categories. Out of those categories, we have themes. And what you begin to see is you begin to get a short-term, long-term roadmap, some of where the gaps exist, as well as some of the items that are, as Jen said, on that wish list, which we refer to as emerging technologies. So from there, once we have that requirement down pat, we fully understand that environment, have tremendous input from and guidance from you. What we then do is begin to look at the vendor qualifications. So we're looking for vendors that are going to certainly have to meet the needs, and then additionally that may be able to meet the wants, but also can fit in the budget that you've established. So it doesn't do a lot of good to say, hey, here's a vendor go through a process with them only to find that you can't afford them, or they don't fit in the budget, or they don't meet the qualifications, certainly at the want level. After that has happened, there's an evaluation process. And that evaluation determination is, how do we score it? What does it look like? And those scores can be weighted. And in the next slide, we'll be talking about that scoring process. So I'll wait till then to go over that in detail. Then there's an initial evaluation of the scoring process for those vendors. That is going to include things like reference checks, asking a vendor, hey, how many, they all want to say how many clients they've got. Well, one of the questions is, well, how many of you signed in the last 12 months? What that gives you is, it gives you a determination of what is the life cycle of that vendor's application set. Are they initially going into it? Is it more emerging technologies? Is it more just stable and it's in the middle life cycle? Or if you're seeing a downturn and they haven't really signed many in that last 12 months, you're probably looking at something that's an end of a life cycle. So that would be a red flag you'd want to certainly consider and negotiate through. From there, once you select that vendor, you go into vendor negotiations. And all vendors start with their standard price. They start with their standard language, so to speak. There's limitations of liability. There's all kinds of things, whether it's enterprise, how they do integration, what the support structures look like. So you negotiate through all of that. And then that final selection typically is a selected vendor with a signed contract. And usually it's a board presentation as well, as to here's where we're at and here's where we're going. So that's kind of the 7-step process. I hope I haven't raced through that too quickly for you, but it basically, then that leads into the solution ranking. So as we begin to look at categories, and again, remember, these can be weighted based on your individual situation. So, the integration may become, you want to weight it higher. You may want to weight clinicals higher. So you can weight these as you see fit. So, but these are the kind of the categories that we look at. And those items then across the key differentiators, they make up what is considered functionality. So let's look at functionality at 50%. 30% of that is ease of use. 10% is going to be how do they scale and across size and specialty. And then 10% of, does it meet the practice's workflow needs? And again, those will be adjusted based on your unique situation that we derive from those early requirements and evaluation and voice of the customer process. So that's kind of an example of what the scoring process would look like. And each of those, again, those categories can be different and tailored to your unique situation, as well as the percentages based on what you as an organization feel is the most important for not only where you're at today, but where you may be going in the future. So with that, Jen, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we take all of that information, turn my video back on, and we really want to see how does all that information combine with how you want to use the system. So here's an example of one of our surveys that we use to say, when we're doing evaluations of the software, to really say, I think this system, I would like to use this system. And we give them a rating and we give them a scorecard. And these are customized per the client and what their needs are. But this is just an example of one of the scoring techniques that we use here. So as we're going through the process, and when it gets time for demos of the vendors, and we're actually looking at their softwares and we're listening to them talk and we're asking questions, we're evaluating them to ultimately make sure that the stakeholders that are in the room are also getting the voice in what we've determined to utilize at your organization. This is another example here of a vendor ranking analysis. Oh, too quick there. There we go. So at the end, as we go through that 7-step process, we put together a full total cost of ownership for you all, because like Dan said, it also has to fit in your budget. And we want to know, how do these vendors compare with their functionality that's That's great. But then from a cost perspective as well, how do they line up? So we put together this full analysis for you, looking at these vendors side by side to make sure that you have a complete picture of what you would be signing up for this organization using the vendor of your choice. And we normally get this down, once we have this analysis, we get this down to 2 vendors, 2 finalists, and we leave it at 2 to kind of help work with negotiations and help them have a healthy competition there for your organization. So we can even walk through that process with you to make sure that we're helping with negotiations to get you to that final step of signing and onboarding the solution. And so we feel like ultimately walking through this process, there's a few key things that will drive success. Obviously, preparing and having a leadership team that's going to back your organization, that's going to know your core values and goals that you want to achieve with your EHR and other digital IT solutions, and making sure that that leadership is present throughout the process. Being open and communicating, because it's nothing's off the table, making sure that we understand and are transparent with every cost, with every solution, with every feature. Everyone's non-biased on our side, understanding what they can offer. And so making sure we're transparent with you, and then you're transparent with us with what you need out of the system. Making sure that we have a culture and decision-making process. So obviously through these 7 steps, there's multiple decisions that have to be made. And so making sure we have a really good process for that. We have people that are going to be responsible for making decisions, and we go with those. So putting together the infrastructure to do so at your organization is very important. Of course, we want to make sure that you all have support through this process. Your physicians are the ones that need to use the product. So we're representing them, and our standards are at the most highest at your organization, as well as representing them to make sure we're delivering a good solution for them. Again, clear communication. We're setting expectations of what's needed along the way to get to our goals, and making sure that we're also getting feedback from the end users. We talk about providers a lot and making sure they're satisfied with their products, but also the end users. So making sure that we have their buy-in, as well as we understand the pain points of the technology. Just a little bit about EHR Concepts if you don't know us, but this is one of our services we offer, on our strategic advisory services, but we have some others as well, really looking at your training and what you're doing for training, looking at other solutions that you may need, IT strategies for. So that's one of our services. We have always done staff augmentation and consulting. So if you ever have a gap there, you need an expert to come in and help you aid in a staffing need temporarily or more of a longer term solution, we can help you there. We have our triple down support. We call it triple down to really focus on the triple aim and now the quadruple aim of providing that the best level support possible to your end user. So everything around your EHR, making sure that they have an end user support system. So we have a command center with EHR experts that sit in there to answer tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support issues for you, and navigate your vendor through the process of support issues as well. And then lastly, our optimization services, which goes into play as of our digital transformation learning, which is really kind of revolutionizing how we learn in EHRs today. And we've created a full digital learning solution that's focused on the clients, that's customized by role, customized by specialty, and hosted in an LMS system so they can learn the EHR more efficient and effectively. And then just a little bit more about us. We've, we love to win awards, and we've won some. We are a certified small women-owned business, and we have that nationally as well as in New York, and we've won some awards, even the most recent one for Best Women-Run Workplace of the Year, which we're super excited about. So we wanted to open it up for the last couple of minutes. If there are any questions, if you have direct questions around our process or around one of the steps that maybe you just would like to know for your organization, we will open it up, and you can use the chat feature and let us know if you have any questions. Let me get over to my chat. Let's see, there is one question coming in here. And Dan, this question is for you. From the process timeline standpoint, if an organization has decided they are at a crossroads and they would like to consider going to RFP and getting some vendors responding from start to finish, what would you say a typical timeline is? And, I know it can flex some, but from a typical timeline standpoint.
Yeah, and so is this for a, well, I'll answer it two different ways. So from a practice perspective, this can be done as quickly as 2 to 3 months. And most of them will run 3 to 4 months. From a organization, a facility, so let's say it's an urgent care or that you have in play, or it's a hospital, whether it's a micro hospital or a general med surge acute, that those run about 4 to 6 months. And the reason that there's that time frame is everybody's a little bit different, so you want to make sure that we basically tailor it to the specifications that are unique and necessary to your organization versus being very generalist. We don't want to be a generalist when it comes to an EHR process, because if you think about it, your EHR is the core of your patient experience. And how you digitize that and how that process unfolds, it takes a little bit of time. The thing to realize in the time frame, though, it's not that you're busy during that entire process. So let's take a 4 months, for example. The first month, we may be doing the voice of the customer. We may be building requirements, identifying vendors that qualify and meet the needs of those requirements. And then that RFP would be created, and then it goes out, and generally they get 30 days to answer that RFP. And so then once those RFPs come back in, the scoring process begins. And so you ramp back up, you've got a scoring process, and you've got, some of the, reference checking, and oftentimes then you'll want to do demos. You'll do a day in the life of, your patient or your employees or your organization, and how that EHR fits into that. So that's kind of a broad timeline, I understand, but it does get tailored down and fine-tuned as requirements unique to you and your organization are vetted out.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And I, just to add to that, from a team perspective, who are the team members that we would kind of bring to the table? Normally, what type of strategy, putting together a team, what would you think that would look like from a team approach? Who would need to be involved?
Is that a question to me, I'm thinking?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So first you want to have representation of all, certainly your primary areas. So your back office, which is your revenue cycle, registration, if you're in an urgent care or a general acute med surge, you would have capacity management, your bed management groups. Then you also want all of your ancillaries to be represented. So your pharmaceutical, your lab, you certainly want physician, PA, NP, caregiver representation. So that team would flex based on the services and service lines that you may offer within your practice or within your urgent care or within your hospital. And so that would flex based on those services. We've done everything from practices to urgent care to general med surge, acute med surge, to academic centers, to level 1 trauma, level 2 trauma, level 3 trauma, level 4 trauma. So we have the experience in across the board with all those, and those teams are different based on the organization and then the uniqueness of an organization.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Dan. I do not see any other questions coming in. So I did want to just thank you all for your time. Obviously, we do offer a free evaluation or assessment for your organization. If it's something that you are interested in, you can reply to the survey. We'd be glad to connect with you, answer any questions, anything we can do to kind of help aid your organization at conquering the crossroads you may be at. So thank you all again for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dan, for co-presenting, and hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jen.